All right, kids, today is the 2nd of June. You know what day this is? This is the day that the Burning Crusade Classic is released, so many people are gonna bask in the nostalgia before they inevitably quit because they're getting bored, but in the meantime nobody will see this video. So instead, what I'm going to be doing is something more fun, more interesting, which is a quiz, a test. We are going to get your knowledge of the Covenant system being tested. How many players you have seen playing in your normal day-to-day activities. You might have gotten some of these things already, even if you haven't paid attention. Which of the covenants is more popular? Which of the specs are playing which covenant? Which are the covenants you never see played, or all the different classes and specs? You're going to be awarded imaginary points for an imaginary final ranking, which is going to allow you to win at the end the prize, which is going to be, I don't know, a round of applause. Is that fine for you? You're not getting anything else, really? So let's go on and begin this quiz, this test. Let's start with this test of your knowledge with the simplest of questions. Please list the covenants by popularity. You have the Necrolords, you have Nightfey, you have Kyrian, and you have Ventir. Which is the most popular? Which is the least popular? The two in between? Which are they? An easy way to think about this is to just try to think at which of the specs are playing, which of the more popular specs are playing which covenants. The answer to this question is Nightfey is the overwhelmingly more popular covenant choice for players, followed lower down by Kyrian, and then there has been a dogfight between Ventir and Necrolords for the bottom half of the popularity of covenants. This is pretty easy, so it's going to be worth 45 points. Now the second question that you have to answer related to the covenant popularity is which is the most popular class for each covenant. So who is currently the bannerman of Kyrian, who is the leader of the Necrolords, who is the hero of the Ventir, and who is in charge in Nightfey. When it comes to Kyrian, it's very simple, just think of the class that has pretty much all three specs viable for Kyrian. When it comes to Necrolords, there is probably only a couple that you will have to think about. When it comes to Nightfey, it might be a little bit harder because you know how OP some Nightfey abilities can be. Ventir also should be pretty easy once you think about it. Okay, so for Kyrian, the obvious answer was Paladin. Paladin, of course, has all three specs perfectly viable with Kyrian because of how powerful Divine Toll is. So it's easily the more popular of the classes for Kyrian. When you look at Necrolord, the two choices were between Shaman and Death Knight, very close to each other because they are pretty popular in the Covenant ability, and the winner is Shaman, is the more popular one. When it comes to Nightfey, of course, the debate around Nightfey was between Mage for Shifting Power, Hunter for Wild Spirits, and Druid for Convoke the Spirits, right? The Nightfey trio. And the winner is Druid. Convoke the Spirits is way more popular than the rest. You know, Mage, yes, as Shifting Power, but just Fire Mage uses it. Whereas for Druid, Convoke the Spirits is basically used universally, so it's easily the more popular one. And lastly, we have Ventir. I said it was a little bit easy once you figured out which of the specs played Ventir a lot, and the answer is Warrior. Warrior, to be fair, is on the decline. More and more warriors are moving to things like Nightfey, particularly, but for now, Warrior is still the champion, the back-to-back champion of Ventir. On this one, however, we are giving out 75,000 points. Now that we know the most popular of the classes for the Covenants, what about, instead of looking at the champions, instead of looking at the top, we look at the bottom of the barrel, the rejects of each covenant. When we look at Kyrian, because this is much less popular and known, I'm gonna give you your options. You can choose between Death Knight, Shaman, and Mage for Kyrian. Shaman has the Vesper Totem, Mage has the Spark, and Death Knight has Shackle the Unworthy. Just how many times have you even heard of these abilities in your game activities? The winner of this is Shaman. Shaman is the least played of the classes when it comes to Kyrian. And to be fair, Death Knight and Mage are still very close. When we go to Necrolord, we shrink down the option only to two, because they are really significantly lower than the rest. Paladin and Demon Hunter. Paladin has an ability I often complain about, because it's really bad, Vanquisher's Hammer, and then you have Demon Hunter, who has Fodder to the Flame, which Blizzard is trying to buff more and more, but for now, it's still very bad. So which one of the two is a goner? Well, Surprisingly, the winner of being the loser for Necrolord is Demon Hunter. Yes, despite the fact that Paladin is also the leader of Kyrian, and many Paladins are going Kyrian, even the ones who aren't, you have probably seen them as Ventir for Ashen Hallow, yet there is still more Paladins playing Necrolords than there are Demon Hunters playing with Father to the Flame. That's just how bad it is. With Night Fae, the answer is a little bit more self-explanatory because at the bottom we have Shaman, Death Knight and Paladin. We know Shaman is very low on Kyrian that we just went over, which means there is only Death Knight and Paladin left. This one is pretty easy between the two because if Paladin isn't the least played for Necrolord, surely Ventir and Kyrian are more played than Night Fae for Paladin. The Blessing of Seasons is absolute garbage for Paladin, so of course Paladin is the least played for Night Fae. And lastly, we have Ventir. Ventir at the bottom, we have two new ones to pick. We have Monk and Druid. Druid for Ventir has Ravenous Frenzy, and Monks have the Fallen Order. Both of these are very bad, mostly because they are big cooldowns, and Druid can already choose a stronger big cooldown, which is Convoke the Spirits, and Monks can already choose a stronger cooldown, which is Weapons of Order, so they're not picking the worst version of a cooldown. At the bottom, nonetheless, we have Monk. Monk is the least of the played classes for Ventir. For this question, we are awarding 7 points and 1 free subscription to Pornhub. Now that we have seen the top and the bottom of the classes for each covenant, what about the specs? Because there are some interesting questions you should answer. Let's start with one that is shifting, and we wonder just how much as if shifted, because it's Holy Paladin. We know that Holy Paladin has risen a lot when it comes to Ventir. We know that it has risen a lot because of Ashen Hallow. It has risen for a lot of Paladins, but particularly for Holy. So the question is, fine, Paladins don't really play much with Night Fae, don't really play much with Necrolord, but what about Kyrian versus Ventir? Which one is currently the most popular for Holy Paladin? That was a trick question, more or less, because the more popular is still by a landslide Kyrian. It is a trick question because at the highest level, it's Ventir that's being played. So most of your exposure to streams, to YouTube videos, to tournaments by high-level Paladins is going to be with Ventir, but the reality is Kyrian is still very much more popular for Holy. Answering correctly to this question is going to give you a free loot on your next boss kill. Then we have a very close guess. These are also pretty mean because you haven't seen many of these specs. For example, Subtlety Rogue. Subtlety Rogue being split between Night Fae and Kyrian as well as Ventir. Which one of the three are sub-rogues playing the most? The correct answer for this, unless overnight 400 Subtlety Rogues respect to Kyrian, the correct answer is Night Fae. With a very tiny advantage, Night Fae is the more represented covenant for sub-rogues. Whoever answered correctly to this one is going to get a goat delivered to their front door. Another pretty interesting question to this test is going to be Holy Priest. Holy Priest has been rather split, and it is the most balanced spec of all when it comes to the representation of its covenants. Some people might argue that is because none of them is particularly strong for Holy Priest, therefore it's just whatever. But Ventir, Necrolord, Kyrian and Night Fae are all possible and viable options for Holy Priest, so which one is winning? There is an easy way to guess the correct one of this one, which is just think about the other healer for Priest. And yes, the correct answer is Ventir. Ventir is just slightly ahead of Necrolord. The reason why it's winning is because Discipline Priest is overwhelmingly in Ventir's favor, which means Discipline Priest mains spilling over to Holy Priest are still going to be playing Ventir, so they're going to keep up the representation of Ventir in Holy as well. If you answered this correctly, you are getting a colony of 75,000 fire ants to be installed in your backyard. Now that we are getting towards the later stages of this quiz, let's go over for a more secular question, a little bit drifting away from the Covenant themselves and more about the popularity. In your normal day-to-day activities, do you see more Druids or do you see more Paladins? Is Druid more popular or is Paladin more popular? The correct answer is Druid. Druid is about almost 10% more popular than Paladin. What about the bottom? Hanging out together in the leather club, slapping each other, we have rogue and monk. Which of the two is the least popular, the least played? Of course, I guess many people are gonna go for the right answer because they always figured rogue to be a pretty popular class. So they wouldn't imagine them being that unpopular, but they actually are. The least popular is of course still monk, but just by a few thousand. Rogue is still quite unpopular compared to all the rest. They have been passed by the new Blizzard's favorite child when it comes to leather melee classes, which is Demon Hunter. So now they are losing more and more players. For guessing this one correctly, you're getting 25 points of suture in your leg. Now back to the Covenant questions. Another interesting question. A trick question, if you may, possibly. The question now is, do you think there is at least one class, maybe two, possibly three, that has Night Fae as its least chosen, its least picked Covenant? Because yes, Night Fae is very popular in numbers, but that's because you might argue druids with Convoke the Spirits, hunters with Wild Spirits, and mages with Shifting Power are hogging up all the numbers, right? Maybe for quite a few other classes, Night Fae is very bad and is chosen for last as a Covenant option. Is there any? And if any, how many don't play Night Fae at all? The answer is yes, there is one. And yes, only one, which is Death Knight. We went over Death Knight when it comes to Necrolords being popular. Death Knights do indeed avoid at all costs playing the furry version of their class. If you guessed this one correctly, tally up your points because you're getting 77.43 points for this question. And now we are closing this quiz for double points, triple points, quadruple points with the in-depth questions about the Soulbinds. Because now we have established the ratings of each Covenant. Night Fae is first, Kyrian is second, Ventir is third, and Necrolord is fourth. But what about the Soulbinds? Which is the most chosen Soulbind for Night Fae? Is it Nia? Is it Corraine? Is it Dreamweaver? The answer is Nia. While Corraine can still have some uses in Mythic Plus, particularly Dreamweaver as usable sometimes cheat death mechanic, Nia is still the overwhelmingly more popular of the Soulbinds. Then we move over to Kyrian. This is possibly even easier. We have Pelagos, we have Cleia, and we have Mechanicus. This is the Covenant with the biggest and largest difference between its Soulbinds because Mechanicus is nearly 20 times less played than Pelagos. Pelagos is the overwhelming favorite when it comes to Kyrian. Where there isn't an overwhelming favorite is Necrolords, between Emeni, Marileth, and Harmir. Which one is the winner overall? The overall winner is Marileth, but not by much. Marileth is almost 45-ish% of the picks, which means 55% is split between Emeni and Harmir, which is pretty healthy. It is also because Restoration and Elemental chose different Soulbinds, so they even out a little bit the picks. Going back to one-sidedness, we have Ventir, because in Ventir, one of these three is way more popular. We have Theotar, we have Draven, and we have Nagia. The winner here is Nagia. Nagia is easily the most picked out of all the Ventir. Now, a correct guess on this question, while not being too simple, is going to award you a Mechanics Fail Pass that you can show your raid leader and be excluded from any possible blame. And with this last series of questions related to the Soulbinds, the quiz is over. The test is done. You can start tallying up your points, your imaginary points, to see how exactly you ended up. Some of these were pretty simple because they were pretty broad. Being able to notice the popularity of certain covenants comes pretty natural. The more you play the game, the more you keep seeing druids channeling Convoke the Spirits or mages pulsing this bluish aura. Every now and again, it becomes pretty simple to see the popular ones and the ones that are rarely seen. But then when you go a little bit more in detail, some of the questions were a little bit harder to figure out. So I have absolutely no idea what the total possible amount of points is, but as a normal player, provided you have kept playing the game, gathered this knowledge passively, you should have been able to get all but maybe 2 or 3 wrong. If you have gotten more, wrong, then unfortunately summer is coming. You will have to stay for your summer studies. You don't get to go on a vacation. You will have to get tested over the summer to prove you're ready for the next year. With this, we can close this video. Me and all the other 50 of you who are not busy playing TBC Classic. Thank you guys for watching the video. I hope I have not made you too depressed by outing yourself as a complete ignorant on what players are playing in the game. Feel free, as usual, to like, comment, follow, subscribe, donate, introduce me to your grandma and whatnot. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, and yes, the decision is going to be up to you, how you want your suture points, by club, by maul, by knife, it's your pick.